are not familiar with who I am, my name is Jennifer Morgan. I'm the Hunter Education Coordinator with the Department of Game and Fish. And we are back to our offices. However, I am presenting from my home today just because I have more reliable internet. So, but I am based out of the Albuquerque office in the Northwest area, and that's now where I'm back to. So it's kind of nice getting my home back to my home and my office at my office. So, and I'll pass it over to Megan.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Megan Otero. I'm the Assistant Coordinator for Hunter Education. And just like Jennifer, I'm based out of the Albuquerque office. I'm currently at home right now, but I kind of going back. I'm doing a half and half. So it's good, like she said, to get back to having that as our office space. But thanks for joining us tonight, wherever you guys are. And hopefully some of you are getting some rain.
Yeah, absolutely. And I neglected to introduce myself earlier on. So I am Christiana Bickford. I'm the department's communications director and based out of Santa Fe. I have returned to the office and am counting the days. I just don't know how many days there will be until we start doing in-person classes again. So fingers crossed we can see everyone's pretty faces in person relatively soon. And I do know a lot of our partners are doing in-person events as well, even though we can't quite be there yet. But so definitely check those out. I have one that I just found today that I'll share with everybody later on this evening and put it in the chat for you. So to get started, tonight we're going to be talking about preparing your equipment for the upcoming hunting seasons. Or even if you just want to get to know your firearms a little bit better, or your shotguns or your archery equipment a little bit better. Specifically, I'm going to share my screen while we're talking. Specifically, we are going to talk about sighting your rifles, patterning your shotguns. Give me a thumbs up if you guys can do that. Awesome. All right. And then Jennifer's going to talk just a little bit about archery equipment because it is not my specialty and I don't know much about it. So she's gonna take that one on. But to get started, we want to talk a little bit about why it's important to sight in your rifle or pattern your shotgun before you go out hunting. And by far, the number one reason is to reduce the potential for wounding an animal or missing an animal, which to me, I always dread when I mess up a shot and wound an animal and just don't have quite that quick, clean, effective kill that we're all shooting for. And so the more time we spend on the range, sighting in our rifles, getting more comfortable with our equipment, the more likely we are to reduce that potential and hopefully not have as much wounding loss while we're out there. It also really helps you get to know the effective range for you and your equipment together. And how far out, how many yards can you shoot with your rifle? Or if you change to a different rifle with a different scope, are you more effective at a farther distance? And how is that going to relate to what animal you're hunting? Is it a deer that maybe you can get a little bit closer to, or a pronghorn that you're going to have to belly crawl through some cactus and grass and hope for a relatively close shot? And so you really want to think about those things as you're picking out your equipment and you're sighting it in. And so the more you shoot and the more you're out there, the more you're going to get comfortable with it and know your effective range. It's also really important to note that every firearm and ammunition that it's paired with will perform just a little bit different. And while we may not notice it, when you start putting it on paper and at different ranges, you can start seeing a little bit of fluctuation in there. And so having that really tuned into your equipment. For instance, my shotgun, I can't remember which brand of ammo it is, but it just doesn't work in my shotgun effectively. And so I have patterned it enough that I kind of have it dialed down. I pick out the same ammo every time because I know that it works really well with my shotgun. It's just as finicky as I am is probably the best way to think about that. And then of course, the more you practice, the more you know, and the more it becomes habit. And I was thinking about this earlier today, is that I had an elk hunt a couple of years ago, and I did quite a bit of shooting. And when I shot my elk, I hit it one shot, quick, clean kill, just like we all wanted to. Like it literally just was grazing grass and like fell over. And it was one of those, they had no idea we were there. It was about 70 yards from me. It was just a great situation, but I had shot enough going into that hunt that I completely reloaded and worked my bolt action. And I didn't even know I'd done it. It just was complete habits. I didn't have to think about it. And I afterwards, my dad was like, "That was really fast," because he was sitting right on my right side. So he saw my hand. He's like, "That was really fast." I was like, "Yeah, I don't even remember doing it." And it was just that I had practiced. And if that animal would have got up and ran, I would have had that bullet already loaded and ready for that second shot if it was needed. So it's one of those, the more you practice and the more you know, the more those habits form and the better off you're going to be and any animal that we're hunting is going to be. So I'm going to start with shotguns and patterning your shotgun. I don't know why this has just always been one of my favorites. So, so we're starting here. But this is how I sight in my shotgun. And I was Googling some different YouTube videos, or no, I'm sorry, pattern my shotgun. I was Googling some different YouTube videos just to see how other people do it. And it was kind of interesting, some of the differences. But I tend to, I'm very lazy, so I tend to set up one patterning board. And I don't like, you can go to some ranges and they will have a patterning board set up for you. And in the ranges I've been to, it's like a 30-inch disc. And I'm not a huge fan of that because unless you hit right in the center of that target, you don't know exactly where your shot is going to go. And so I prefer to do it this way. I get like a 4x4 piece of cardboard if I'm doing it myself. If I've done it for department events, I've used plywood, which right now is really expensive. So maybe stick with cardboard, at least for the time being. And then I like to use T-posts and put them on either side. And you can see in this picture, this person has built like this really funky little frame, which is super cool. Oh, if you're going to be doing a lot of it, that's pretty cool to have that frame in there and something that you can easily snap together. I don't have that, so I just use 2 T-posts and then I wire my cardboard or my plywood up to the T-post and then put some sort of paper over the top, which I have used a lot of flip chart paper because somehow I ended up with a whole bunch of that in stock. And so it was cheap and easy for me to staple up there and use that for my 4x4 sheet of paper. I just put 2 on the board next to each other. It's always important when we're out shooting to have our eye in your protection. And then of course we do need our shotgun and different types of ammo that you think you might want to need. And I'll show you a chart to help you kind of get pointed in the right direction, depending on what you might want to be hunting. So a patterning of your shotgun, I think I saw that pop up in there, is basically, I'll show you some pictures in just a minute, but you're trying to figure out when you shoot a shotgun, it comes out of the barrel and it goes into a long string of pellets. And so it gets long and it gets wide. And so you want to figure out what that pattern is so that you know if there's any holes in your pattern that might wound a bird while you're out there hunting. Hopefully that clears it up just a little bit. So if not, we'll try and show you some pictures that might help a little. And then I like to take a rangefinder of something to determine your 30-inch circle. And basically there's some studies out there that have shown that that's a good distance, that if you can get so many pellets into a 30-inch circle, it gives you a really good idea of what is happening with your shot at that yardage. So you can kind of say, okay, at 30 yards, I have enough pellets in this 30-inch circle to effectively kill whatever I'm after. And then some sort of rangefinder, because we don't want to guess exactly how far we're shooting. So the more accurate you can be, the better off you're going to be. So a tape measure, a rangefinder, something so you have a good idea if you're shooting at 20 yards or 30 yards or 40 yards.
Christiana,
Yes.
we have in the chat, could you explain what is patterning?
Yeah. Did I cover that okay, or do you want me to go back over it? I'll just go over it again. No, oh, got it. Okay.
You got it. Yep.
Got it. Sorry, I snuck it in there, Megan. And so when you set up your range, you really want to think about what is a safe location. There's not a lot of shooting ranges here in Santa Fe, and so I go up on the hill behind my house, and somehow there's an old water tank that's up there that's really in the corner of this meadow with no roads coming in behind it. And the water tank, when it dried out, there's a nice berm off to the side. So it really has a nice backdrop, and I can shoot out to quite a few hundred yards. So I can really get it. So always pick a safe location. Shooting ranges are great if you have one close to you. Set up your patterning board and the different yardages that you want. And then try to choose what chokes you want to get more information on. And so a choke with your shotgun is either going to tighten your pattern down, and so it'll be longer and narrower, or you can widen it out so it'll still be long, but it'll be a wider pattern as it goes down range. And so you'll want to kind of figure out what you're going to shoot and how far. And then we always want to shoot at least 3 times so we get a good average of numbers. So if we shoot and we say, okay, there's 200 pellets in my 30-inch circle, and then the next time we come out and there's only 150, there's a pretty big discrepancy there. And so you'll want to take the average of those numbers. But at least 3 gives us a good average of how many pellets we're getting into our circle. And so what you'll get is something like this. And so you can see in this top graphic that in our 30-inch circle, there's quite a few pellets in there. You get really good at counting. It's great if you have a younger child that needs to work on counting to 200 or some large number that this could be good to help them with. And so you can see in this circle right here, there's quite a few pellets in there. And at whatever range this target was shot at, it seems like that's a pretty good concentration. In this other target down here, you can see that there's quite a number of fewer holes in there, and it's a little bit deceptive because the shoot and sees kind of expand out instead of just having one little dot like that top target. But you can see there's a little bit less in there, and so you may look at this ammo and think this isn't the right ammo for whatever species I may be hunting. And this chart is insanely confusing, but we're gonna try and break it down a little bit for you. And then I'm gonna email you guys tonight. I will email you a link to this chart because it takes a little bit to kind of break it down. But what this is Tom Roster, he's out of Klamath Falls, Oregon, and he was contracted several years to do some studies to see how many pellets had to hit a bird in the vital zones to have a quick, clean, effective kill without having a lot of wounding loss of our birds out there. And so he did a lot of studies. It was really interesting. I went to a training of his, and they talked about they would shoot hundreds and hundreds of doves over multiple seasons, or geese or ducks or pheasants, and then they would do an x-ray of them and count the number of pellets in the vital zone. And then before this, they would go out and they would pattern their shotguns to figure out how many BBs were in that 30-inch circle. And so they put all that together and came up with this chart. So it's like 16 years worth of data that comes into this. And so what you'll do to read this chart, and bear with me because I know this is a lot of crazy information right here, but once I figured it out and I've started using this to help me when I'm picking out what ammo, and instead of just Googling, what do I need to shoot a dove in New Mexico, this chart's really helped me kind of break that down a little bit. So dove season starts September 1st. Yeah, September 1st. So we're going to talk about that one because it's one of my favorites. And so if you come down here to the morning dove line, you'll see, we're going to ignore this one just a little bit, but you'll see that he recommends that you use a steel 7 to 8 shot. And I will say that this is all in steel because this was a non-toxic shot study that he did. And so instead of using the lead, which you can use for some birds, he studied all non-toxic shot. And you do need that if you're hunting over water or hunting waterfowl, you do have to have that non-toxic shot. So he came in here and said, in steel, you need a 7 to 8 or a heavy shot 7.5. And here's the minimum load weights. You'll see that on the side of the box when you purchase your ammo. And then for an effective kill on a dove, you need at least 1 to 2 pellets to hit the vital zone. So not a whole lot, but in that 30-inch circle, to have an effective kill, you need 200 to 210 BBs in that circle to ensure that you have 1 or 2 hit that vital zone. So clear as mud, right? Yeah. Gosh darn it, it's so sensitive, sorry. And then over here in this last column, you can see the type of choke that is recommended to hunt doves with this size of ammo. So you can see that he has in there an IC or a modified, or if you're going with a heavy shot, a light mod, it works well. So that's what I use when I'm going to say I'm going to pattern my shotgun for doves. I will pull out one of these chokes with a steel 7 to 8 and go test it and see which one's going to work best in my shotgun. And then when it comes, you know, if we're going to hit some geese later in the season, if we come up here towards the top you can see it breaks it out over, over decoys, or if you're just hunting without decoys. And you'll see here that he recommends that you use a steel BB to a triple B, or a heavy shot to a B. And again, that's all in steel. Again, it's only 1 to 2 pellets needed for that effective kill. But if you look here, we're now shooting BBs, which are much larger than our 7 to 8 shot for dove. And so there's less BBs that have to be in that 30-inch circle to have an effective kill on a large goose over decoys. And then he also recommends in this chart with the data that they compiled that you use either an improved cylinder, an IC, or a modified choke. So that kind of, go ahead, Jen.
I wanted you to kind of back up to your previous slide. It will tie to this slide. So the one with your patterning, there we go. One thing I just wanted to highlight based on what Christiana was saying when we're talking about patterning and how many BBs and what choke should you use or how far of your yardage. And so you can kind of tell the difference between these two target patterns. And the one in the lower corner with the shoot and see is if you see a pattern happening like that, your choke, you might need to change out of your shotgun for the range that you're shooting. So when I look at that particular target, I'm thinking that maybe my choke pattern is opening up too soon. And so I don't have a concentration for that effective kill, or I need to move closer. So I'm not using the right type of choke for the yardage. There's too much spread in that particular choke or that particular pattern. And so I'm not going to get enough BBs to be, or pellets to be effective. So if you look at those two, you're going to have to kind of determine, I need to move. So if you're concentrating just on that shoot and see, I need to move closer or use a choke pattern or choke tube that's going to concentrate the pellets to a farther distance. So I'm hoping that makes sense. And it correlates it to that chart, that data chart that Christiana was showing you.
Yeah, and I think this stuff is quite confusing, and I wish we were in person because we could get out and start shooting and you'd be like, oh, got it. So trust me, when you get out there, you're gonna be a little bit confused, but it'll come back and you'll be like, okay, this makes a lot of sense and is easier than what we have. So to try and clarify it just a little bit more, I'm gonna turn to our friends in, I believe it's in Oklahoma, and they broke down this video for us, and I think it might bring it all back together just a little bit. So give me a thumbs up. I was having trouble with volume earlier, so fingers crossed it'll work if I can find my mouse.
So you're asking yourself, why should I have to pattern a shotgun? You know, there's a lot of shot in there and it just goes out in the air and you shouldn't have to pattern it. Well, you need to pattern it to find out if your equipment is working good together, your gun with your choke, with your ammo, and you need to get all that working good together. And the other part of this is some ammo shoots different in every gun. Every gun shoots different with different chokes and with the combination of ammo. So you really need to try to figure that all out before you get out there. And you can actually see it on the paper rather than just shooting and go, man, that just isn't working real well. So you want to be able to do that. And the last thing is that it gives you that peace of mind that you know you've got the right equipment when you go out there and you're hunting those ducks, and you don't have to worry about, you know, hey, am I using the right size ammo for this? And am I going to be able to take that shot or not? So it really helps to give you that confidence to make those shots. Okay, so now we need to actually get set up to make a shot on the paper. What you need to do is get a 4x4 sheet of like plywood or even a pallet, and you can put a piece of cardboard on there or paper or something that you can shoot into, and then you're going to be able to count the holes that are there into that paper or the cardboard. And you want to be able to set that up at the distance that you're going to be shooting. The one way we find that out is through Tom Roster's lethality chart, and that gives us the ability to do that. We have that in the regulations in here, so you look it up in there, and then it's got the chart available to you. Now, to be able to use the chart, you need to figure out, okay, what am I going to hunt? For today, I'm going to say that we're going to hunt large ducks over decoys. And on here it says large ducks over decoy. So that's a good one to start with there. And it says we're going to be shooting probably 20 to 45 yards. And that's probably about right. I would say you're probably not going to make over a 35 to 40 yard shot if you're hunting over decoys. You know, you're calling them in, they're coming into you. It also tells you, it gives you an idea of what size shot to use and the best that's been done through the different tests that they have done. And on this, it says steel number 6 to number 2, and then also has heavy shot, which is a type of shot, 6 to 4. So right now I've got 6 and I've got number 4s. So I'm good there. And then I've got the minimum load weight needs to be a 3/4 ounce to an ounce on the steel and a 1 to 1 1/8 on the heavy shot. So I'm on the regular steel and I've got 1 1/8 and I've got 1 ounce. So I'm in a good range on that as well. Now, for any animal, you need 1 to 2 pellets to hit them in the vital areas, you know, in the brain, in the spinal cord, the heart, the lungs, liver, you know, those kind of areas that's going to cause a lethal kill on that animal. And then it also gives you an idea of how many pellets should be within this 30-inch circle when we finally get down here to the patterning board. And on this one, it says you need 85 to 90 pellets in that 30-inch circle in order to get that lethal kill, that 1 to 2 pellets in the area where you need it to be. Also gives you even the chokes to be using. And on this one, it says improved cylinders from 20 to 35 yards and modified from 35 to 45. So it gives you a good area to start. And so you can, you know, at least start at that point to see if you need to make adjustments. So we've got modified in here, and we're going to shoot at about 40 yards. And I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we're not going to have on camera. We're just going to shoot that, and we're going to go down to the board, and I'm going to show you what happened, and we'll show you how to actually count the pellets and do what you need to do down there. Now, we're down here to the patterning board where I've made the shot. It was 40 yards and shot with a number 4 modified choke and was, again, what, 40 yards. And you just pick for the center of the paper. I mean, if it's a little high, a little low, no big deal. You're just wanting to find the densest area of the amount of shot. Try to fit as much of the shot inside this 30-inch circle that you can. This one's clear, so you can kind of see everything. If you use a 15-inch, you know, piece of string with a line and a tack, you're also going to be able to see everything. But all I do is come up here, I find the kind of the densest area, and I put this on here, and I take my marker, and I mark all the way around this circle, and I already did that for us. So mark all the way around the circle. Then once I've marked around there, then I come in here and I count all the little shot that's inside here. If it's touching the inside that circle or on the line, and then I came up with the number of 94. Now, usually what I would do is I would take a marker and I'd kind of mark these off as I'm counting so that I know I didn't miss one. I didn't do that today just for, you know, sake of not marking on this everything. So, you know, 94 meets our requirements on the sheet. The lethality chart, it said 85 to 90, so we're in good shape. It's a little bit higher than what, you know, they even recommend. So that's good. We got a few extra pellets out there. Now, one time is not really sufficient. It gives you a good idea, but you should shoot at least 3 times. So you take this piece of paper off here, put another one, shoot another one, do the same thing, or set up multiple ones up here and shoot each one with a different, with the same gun, same shell, and then you get an average. 10 is better, but 3 is sufficient enough, and it gives you an average. And so, you know, this one may be 94, one of them may be 110, one of them may be 85, who knows? But you check those out and get the best average, and then you can go off of that lethality chart and make sure that you're within the parameters that they're saying. As you can see, it's not really difficult to figure out, the density of your shot, and if you've got enough pellets in that area to make that lethal kill on a bird or animal that you're shooting at. Now, in our example, it ended up that, hey, we had the right ammo with the right firearm and the choke, everything worked together, and we met our requirements down there, and we feel comfortable that we can make our shot in that 40-yard range. So what if we didn't have that and we needed to figure out, how are we going to make adjustments on that? There are ways to do that. Let's say, all right, you got an over and under here, and you've got modified chokes in because you're going to be shooting, but you're needing to increase the number of pellets in there. Well, modified's pretty high without going to a full choke, which doesn't recommend in here. So let's just go down a little bit in the size of the shot because we've got the ability to do that. Instead, we can go down to a 6. So we could take the number 6 here and we could shoot that at a new sheet of paper, and we go ahead and get that shot, and we figure out using your firearm that, hey, that increased our number of pellets that are inside that 30-inch circle down there and got us to that area where we needed to be on the lethality. Let's say you only have one choke and you don't have the ability to change it. The only way you're going to be able to make changes is with the ammunition. And it may be that you have to change brands, and a number 4 in a different brand might work better than a number 4 in the brand that you're using. So you need to be able to kind of play around with those and get the right ammunition for the firearm that you're using and for the chokes that you're using.
So hopefully that helps a little bit, actually. See when it goes down there, see your 30-inch circle, and then count it up. I like to mark them off like he mentioned, because if not, I'm blonde and I end up counting the same hole like 5 times. So I do like to kind of mark them off as I go. And one more thing when I am patterning my shotgun is that I really like to think about the distances, and not just on board, but how big a target is compared to, I use the end of my shotgun, and I'll put a decoy up at 20 yards, at 30 yards, and 40 yards, and how big it is compared to the barrel of my shotgun gives me an idea of how far out that bird might be. And so when you have a moving target, as it comes across, it can really very quickly go from 20 yards, 30 yards, 40 yards, and then it's gone. And so you need to have an idea of exactly how far out there is that bird, and is it still within my effective range that I've determined for my shotgun and with my skills. And so setting up something that's life size or that's a similar size, whether it's a big paper plate or something that is relatively the same, or I get decoys from Sportsman's Warehouse or Cabela's or something like that, and we'll set those up at those distances so you can kind of get an idea of how far away that bird might be, which also helps in the reduced wounding loss when you're out there. So, and no, there's way more that we can talk about with shotguns, but I don't want to keep everyone here all night. So I'm going to shift into rifles really quick. And again, setting in your rifle, I think is really important to kind of get your habits down, see what ammo is going to work best with your gun. When I sight in my rifle especially for a big game hunt, I always sight in at least 2 rifles that I'm comfortable with. I have a 7mm and a 308 that is my favorite. I've loved my 308 since I was little, and a lot of people don't like that, but I do. And so I'll sight in a couple, and it's really easy when you're out in the field to knock a firearm over and knock your scope out of alignment with your sight in. And so having that backup that's just easy and ready to go may be the difference in taking a day or half a day from your hunt to go resight in your rifle. So I always do at least 2. I know people do a little bit more, but if you have that opportunity, it's definitely a good thing to do. So I have my place up on the hill by my house that I go, but ranges are great. This range is obviously not in New Mexico. I don't think we have any that look quite that green, even with this amount of moisture. And again, always have your rifle, your ammo, and of course your eye and your ear protection to be as safe as you possibly can be. And one of the big differences with shooting your shotgun is you saw in some of the pictures, you're shooting in a standing position. And so when you sight in your rifle, you want to be as steady as possible. So people can use these sandbags. So you can have some different sand to prop it up to a different height, and some steadiness there. The tripod, which I end up, after I sight my rifle, I always go to a tripod because that's what or a bipod because that's what I love having that on my firearms when I'm hunting. I've used a lead sled before, but I don't love the way they fit in my shoulder. It always bugs me. So I've used it. It's just not my favorite. So I always end up going back to one of these when I'm sighting in my rifle. It's not quite as steady as a good lead sled or something, but always have your steady rest and then a steady table to shoot from. So something that's moving around or that isn't level on the ground or flat on the ground so it's not rocking is really important. And these good range benches are good. I've used plastic tables, like a good sturdy plastic table that I can weight down. And then I like to use some sort of a spotting scope or binos. And when you start shooting out a little bit further, sometimes it gets a little bit tedious to walk back and forth to your target. And so I like having the spotting scope there so I can kind of get an idea of which bullet hits the target, if that was my first shot, second shot, third shot, or my second group, or exactly what it might be. And then of course the rangefinder, again, if you have one available, just to know for sure when you're sighting it in at 100 yards or 200 yards that you have that down and you can say, yep, I'm still right on at 100 or 200 yards. So these can be a lot of fun. I like using the shoot and see ones that were in that picture earlier that kind of light up with the green behind it. The hard part is when you start getting narrow, those spots kind of start dialing it in so you have a really tight group. Some of those spots can blend together a little bit. So I usually use a grid when I'm actually sighting it in and then switch to the shoot and see to kind of have a little excitement, which may say something about my life if that's the excitement of my life, but so be it. So the process is pretty easy to do. You just want that steady bench. I usually start between 25 and 50 yards. I've seen a few things that recommend starting a little bit closer, but I worry when you get within that 25 yards with a high-powered rifle. Maybe if you're shooting a 22 and practicing for squirrel or rabbit season, 25 yards is a good place. But I don't like to be super close, and that way if I accidentally hit a T-post or something, anything that blows back is less likely to come back and hit me, which it won't hurt, but I still don't want it in my eyes or anything. So I usually start 25 or even 50 yards. If you have a new rifle, you'll want to get it bore sighted, and there's lots of YouTube videos out there to walk you through that process. I usually just have either somebody who's a firearms expert or has more experience with firearms than I do the bore sighting, or take it to a firearms a dealer that's close by that can help you with that. So that's what I like to do. There are ways and you can do it yourself, but I like to solicit help from other people with a little bit more experience. And so when you're ready to start shooting, you'll want to have at least 3 shots at your target and get an idea of where your ammo is hitting on that target. And so is it relatively close to each other or is it pretty spread out? If it's pretty spread out, there could be some issues with your scope's not tightened down, or if you were not using a steady rest, you might have flinched a little bit. So that's why it's important to have that steady rest and minimize the potential for pulling your rifle or your shot off a little bit. But you want to try and get a group that's fairly tight together and to get an idea of where that's hitting on the target. And when you first start out, the whole idea is just to get it on paper. That's the whole goal, is just to get it on paper, and then you can start moving your scope around after that. I didn't miss anything. So here's an example, and this one started off. If this is your first group, it's a great place to start. I tend to be a little bit more sporadic and then have to get myself kind of dialed back into a group like this, but it comes with it. And so what you can see here, if you were aiming for the 10 ring on this target, and these are very similar to the targets that I like to use when I sight in a rifle, this group, you kind of take the average, and you can see that in this blue dot right here in the center. And you'll see that from the 10 ring, you're about 3¼ inches low. And then from the vertical line, you're about 2½ inches right. So what it's telling us is to get back into the middle, we need to bring our scope back to the left, and then up a little bit. And you're gonna do that through these adjustments on your scopes. Now, not every scope, there's a lot of scopes that have some different functions, and this is kind of more of the basic one. It is the one like I use, but there's some now that have all sorts of adjustments, and it's really best to really learn those, watch some YouTube videos, go out and shoot it a lot and kind of learn where your different marks are. My scope that I have I can zero it in, and then it has little lines. I think mine are below, and so that can help me know if I need to hold an inch below or 2 inches below, or an inch high, 2 inches high, or 3 inches high, I think is how I normally set it up. But you're gonna make adjustments, and so on your scope, there's these 2 rings. They have one for elevation and one for what they call the windage, but it's really your left to right. I don't know why they call it windage for sure. But you'll want to make your adjustments here. These have little caps on them, and they're really easy just to screw off. And then I always use whatever coin I have in my pocket or my purse, so a quarter or a nickel or something. You can turn it a couple of flips, and then you'll want to shoot 3 more shots and see if you have it right. I like to just adjust one at a time. So I always adjust for my vertical first. And so on that last target, let me go back. I like to take mine and adjust it back so that my vertical's in line, because that to me is my number one thing to get back, straighten back out there. So I would like to bring it back over 2.5 inches, and then when I got that part figured out, then I would work on bringing it up. So when you make your adjustments, hopefully you would get something more like this. So this person did both of the adjustments at once. And so you can see that it's a little bit closer to the center of the target. They got their windage figured back out. They got it brought up just a little bit. And then the second time around, they were centered in at 100 yards. Depending on what you're gonna shoot, you may want to be centered at 100 yards or 200 yards. And depending on what I'm hunting, for instance, on my deer hunt a couple of years ago, I sighted in at 250 yards because I thought I might end up with a little bit longer of a shot. And then I make a chart. I think I have a picture here in a minute that will show you, but I make a chart and either tape it to my gun or somewhere on my equipment so I can see exactly if I'm sighted in at 250 yards and I see an animal at 300 yards, how much I need to hold higher or lower. So you have the vitals, and then if you're off a little bit, you can hold up a little bit or down a little bit based on where you need to go. So just to get the sight in, we're gonna turn to our friends in Texas, and they're gonna talk about sighting in your rifle.
If you want to be a capable and responsible hunter, you need to have a rifle that is accurate and that you are confident and comfortable shooting. To achieve this, you need to spend some time at a shooting range. Many times, initial sight adjustments on a rifle scope will be made by bore sighting, either with a device or using the naked eye. But this isn't enough.
Just because your rifle has been bore sighted, you cannot depend on that alone for accuracy. It is still your responsibility to take your firearm to the shooting range to sight it in, so you know exactly how your firearm is shooting. Basic equipment that you'll need to bring with you to the shooting range are sandbags or rifle rests to help you shoot, and also a spotting scope.
A good staple gun will help with putting up targets. And you always want to wear eye and ear protection. It is also very important to bring a particular type of ammunition.
You always want to use the ammunition that you will be hunting with when you're sighting in your rifle.
This is because different cartridges vary in the way they perform. If a rifle is sighted in with one type of ammunition, and then a different brand of ammunition or a different bullet weight is used when hunting, the shot will not impact where you expect it. You risk missing the animal you're hunting, or worse, wounding it. You also want to pay attention to what kind of target you use.
The best type of target when sighting in a rifle is a target with a 1-inch grid. This helps you determine how to set your scope adjustments. Start with a short range, such as a 25-yard range, to begin sighting in your rifle.
If your scope has variable powers, Dial it up to the highest magnification.
It is best to shoot 3 rounds of ammunition through your firearm. 1 round needs to be loaded at a time. Take your time. You want to concentrate on good firing techniques. Make sure you take a deep breath, exhale halfway, squeeze the trigger, follow through, squeezing all the way through after the shot has been fired, and then proceed 2 more times.
For each shot, be certain to aim with the crosshairs of the scope on the exact center of the target. This 3-shot group will reveal how far off center your scope is set.
You will take the average of those 3 shots to make your adjustment.
The average location of these 3 shots is about here. To bring the group to center, the scope needs to be adjusted 2.5 inches to the left and up 3 3/4 inches. On many scopes, the adjustment dials are covered by caps. There are 2 dials, one for elevation and one for windage.
Once you've made your adjustments, you need to put another 3 rounds through your firearm, one at a time, making sure you follow good shooting techniques. At the 25-yard range, you are focusing on your windage or side-to-side adjustment.
The average of these 3 shots is here. With regard to windage, it is centered. To adjust the elevation, it's time to move to a shooting line with targets at a greater distance.
When you're on the 100-yard line, you're going to follow the same procedure you did at the 25-yard line. You're going to shoot 3 rounds of ammunition through your firearm, making sure you follow good shooting techniques. At 100 yards, after you shoot your 3 rounds of ammunition, you're looking at elevation, or how high up or down your ammunition hits your target.
If most of the shots you take when hunting are at 100 yards, then your work is done. Your rifle is now zeroed at 100 yards. Hunters that take longer shots will adjust their scope a few inches higher, so it will be zeroed at 200 yards.
If adjustments need to be made in elevation on your scope, you need to fire 3 more rounds through your firearm.
Be sure to check your barrel between shots. If it gets too hot, let it cool down. A hot barrel can deliver inconsistent results. Once you've sighted in your rifle and you are satisfied with the groupings, you're still not ready to go hunting. Once you arrive at your hunting camp, it's a good idea to check your rifle and make sure it's still zeroed in. So to review, start at short range to check the windage. Use targets with a 1-inch grid. Use exactly the same ammunition you will use when hunting. Carefully fire 3-shot groups. Take the average of the 3 shots to determine what adjustment to make. If your barrel gets hot, stop and wait for it to cool. Move to the 100-yard firing line to adjust the elevation. And remember to check the accuracy of your rifle at the hunting camp before you go hunt. Being an accurate shooter will make you a more successful hunter, and it can also make you a more ethical hunter.
Not only do you owe it to yourself to be a good shooter, you also owe it to the animal for a quick, clean, and accurate shot.
Cool. So, sorry. There we go. So it's a quick overview, and I know that it sounds like this is a lot of information that I'm throwing at you guys. And really, it's a lot easier than it sounds. And when you get out there and you start shooting, it'll be like, okay, I got this, and I can pull it together. I do recommend getting out there as much as possible. I've had other people sight in my rifles for me, and that's great until I get there, and I just don't have quite those habits and the skill to kind of dial in my own shot and to have the confidence in the skills that I've developed to make a clean, effective kill. So I always recommend that you do it yourself, or go with somebody that can help you. And again, I hope that we can get back out and maybe we can do some of these workshops in person at some point in the future. But that's kind of an overview of patterning your rifles and your shotguns. Muzzle loaders can be a whole different ballgame just because there's so many different types of muzzle loaders. If you're shooting open sights, if you're shooting with a scope, it'll be very, very similar to sighting in your rifle, other than the cleaning process. And if you shoot a bunch of rounds to your muzzle loader, you have to clean every, I believe it's like 5 to 7 shots. So you'll definitely want to take some extra supplies with you. But I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on muzzle loaders today. Instead, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer to talk about archery equipment, because that season's coming up. It's right around the corner. So, Jennifer.
Thanks, Christiana. Yeah, it's hard to believe. Actually, Megan and I were just talking about how antelope season literally is the first part of August. It's pretty much imminent. So I think a few ladies that we've had on board were successful in drawing an antelope hunt, and I do believe one person was drew an archery tag. So that's super exciting and be right around the corner. So I'm going to turn off my virtual background because my prop here will just blend in. So I'm going to turn it off so you guys can actually see. I'm going to be using my bow as an illustration. I shoot a compound. I'm a little too close to my camera, so but I'm right-handed, and one of the things that I want to point out, especially for those of you who are new to archery or bow hunting, is it is super imperative that you go to a reputable sporting goods store or archery shop and have those individuals fit you to your bow. There's a big craze, or there was a big craze, especially after Hunger Games, that hey, I can just go to Walmart, I can pull a bow off the rack, it's got, you know, the sights and the arrows and everything included, and I can just grab that and I can be a successful archer, which that is not the case. This bow is set up specifically for me. You have to consider your draw length, which is the length of pull from your arrow straight back, or for your string straight back. And also your draw weight. The last thing you want to do is purchase something like this and you can never pull it back. That you're just not going to have any kind of fun. And so without getting too terribly technical, I'm just going to recommend that if you are new to archery, go to a reputable shop and they will set you up with your length of pull and your weight, and then fit you to the bow. There's a ton of different types of bow manufacturers out there. If you're interested in more primitive style with your recurve or your longbow, again, that draw weight is super important, because again, there is no let off on that more primitive archery equipment like you have with a compound. So you're going to be holding all of that weight. And so it's really important that you go and try those things out, get some guidance from those shop folks. So after you get that set up, and I apologize, I forgot to put my arrows back in my quiver when I went and shot the other day. So they're in my bow, in my arrow quiver in my case in the garage. So, but one of the things you have to consider too, once you know your weight and your length, is you'll match that arrow length to yourself and your equipment, and the shaft also, the stiffness or the spine. You need to make sure that that arrow is going to be able to handle the energy that's going to be coming out of your equipment. So if I'm shooting 45 pounds out of this particular bow right now, and if I were to put an arrow to this bow that didn't have that stiffness of spine, it could shatter because it wouldn't be able to handle the energy that's coming out of this. Plus, I don't want to shoot an arrow that's too heavy, because then I'm not going to have enough energy to be effective. And so one of the big things that you need to think about is that. And again, if you're shooting more primitive, then you can go to the fiberglass or the wooden arrows, because you're not going to be having as much energy as you have through a compound. So just make sure, and your archery shop will be able to hook you up with the right arrow stiffness, so that spine stiffness to match your equipment, to match that energy that's going to be coming out of this. Obviously with a compound bow, you have the cams. That's what's helping you with the energy transfer into your arrow. And what these help you do too is there's let off. And so I think on this particular bow, I want to say a 70% let off. So when I'm pulling back and I finally get to full draw, I am not holding that 45 pounds. I'm holding 75%, or this bow is holding 75% of that weight. So I can hold that for a longer amount of time if I have to wait for that animal to give me a really good broadside or quartering away shot. And so when you're also thinking about your equipment, your string is super important to make sure it's not frayed, and they make a bow wax because in New Mexico we're so terribly dry, you really have to pay attention to your string and your cables to make sure that they're not frayed. If they are, you need to make sure that it's replaced. These cams can get out of tune, which when I went to the archery shop not too long ago, I was out of tune, so they have to put it on their press, fix that up. And in that way, everything is in alignment and everything is moving simultaneously. So I have a really good, accurate arrow flight to my target. So there's a little bit of complexity when you're looking at this, but again, I just go to a reputable shop and have that done. Not very many people have the knowledge and the equipment to be able to tune your own equipment. So those are some of the things to keep in mind. Also, I have a set of sight pins. I'm getting older, just had a recent birthday, and I realize my eyes are going bad, especially in darker environments. And so I have purchased a set of sights that have some fiber optic pins that will gather light in low light conditions. And plus I have a little battery here, and it will project light into my sight window. It's not projecting light onto my target, which is illegal, but it's projecting light into my sight pins, that when I see my target and I'm in a lower light condition, I'm able to see my pins and be a lot more accurate than I never had to use those types of technologies 20 years ago, but I do now. So that's okay, embrace it and go with it. There's lots of things out there that will help you. So if you think, oh, my eyes are bad and I can't do this anymore, there are things out there that will help you have fun and be more accurate and lessen that frustration for you. When you're sighting in your equipment, it's very similar to, sighting in a rifle, in that you'll start off at a short distance. 10 yards is preferable. You shoot 3 to 5 arrows. If you're new to archery, I would shoot 5, because again, you could have flinched, you could have not followed through correctly, and you have some outliers. And so start with a 5 group shot pattern, and then again, you'll look at where those arrows go. And then what you'll need to do though, when you're first sighting in for your windage and your vertical, is you're going to move your sights to the direction of error. So if all your shots are low, you're going to move your sights down. If all your shots are then also right, you're going to move your sights right. And so you'll get that initial sight or your patterning right there at 10 yards. And then once you have that dialed in, you can move out to 20 and you'll do the same thing. But this housing for your should be pretty much set to where then all you're having to do is making adjustments to your smaller pins. So your housing you'll get done first, and then you'll move to your actual individual pins once you're going from 20 to 30 yards. One thing that you'll notice sometimes is if you're moving from 30 to 40 to 50 yards and now you're starting to see your arrows, not be as accurate, and maybe you're moving more right and you're moving more left, but your up and down is fine, you'll have to look at your rest. And you can't really see this. I have a drop away rest, but sometimes these can be out of center. And so if you're noticing, hey, I was really consistent at 20 yards, and the farther I move back, now I'm moving more and more away from center. Make sure you're anchoring every time. So that anchor point is super important with shooting. It's kind of like shotgun. You need to make sure that you're lining up your sight picture, your sight alignment the same way every time, and same with archery. But if you know you're doing all that, your follow through is good, and you're just getting frustrated, have your archery shop look at your rest and make sure that it's center. Because as you move farther and farther back from your target, any small imperfections in your shooting style is going to be magnified. And so from that short distance, you might be spot on, but as you move farther and farther back, even your anchor point, if you adjust it just a tiny bit, it's going to be magnified out to 40 yards. So always, when you're thinking about shooting as well, is with that anchor point is come back to the same exact point every single time. I have a peep sight that helps me line up my eye with my sights, and so I don't have quite as much going on to have to focus on. I use a release. That also helps me be a lot more consistent in my string pull. And what I do is this release goes on this D loop, and when I pull back to my anchor point every time, I squeeze that trigger on my release, and it's just like a trigger squeeze on your rifle. It should be a surprise to you. So you're just waiting for that shot, and then you squeeze that trigger with a follow through. I don't move my arms or anything, because if I flinch or I do anything when I release, it's going to affect the trajectory of my arrow. So it's super important to work on your anchor points and your trigger release and your follow through with archery, because again, a minuscule little, if you drop your bow arm even a centimeter to see where that arrow flight went, it's going to totally mess up the trajectory of that arrow, and you're going to miss your target, or you run the risk of wounding. So some of the other things that I have on my bow is I have a stabilizer that just helps with redistributing the center of gravity of my bow. I have a wrist strap. Again, you don't want to hold on to the grip, because if you hold tightly, again, that will tweak where your bow is and affect the trajectory of your arrow. I know I'm getting a little complicated here, but just your basic things that you need are obviously your arrows, your sights, and you don't really need all this other stuff, but the more you shoot, the more dealios and thingamabobs that you end up putting on your rifles and your bows. But it also, there's technology out there that can help you be a whole lot more successful. I'm going to set this down. The other thing you need to think about too is when Christiana was talking about the bullets or the shells or the cartridges for your rifle or your shotgun, you also have to think about what you're going to put on the end of your arrow. If you're doing practicing, you're going to have a field tip, and those also come in different weights. And depending upon the type of game that you're hunting, or what the types of shooting, or your draw weight and your arrow weight, will kind of depend upon the weight of the point. And so same thing with shooting is you're going to need to match the grain of your target or your field point, which is right here. This is 100 grains or 85 grains is what I shoot. I typically go with 100, and I need to match my broadhead to match the same weight as my field point, because it's going to fly different if I have lighter or heavier on the end of my arrow. And that's going to affect, essentially, my whole sight alignment will be off if I shoot something different on the target range as I do when I'm hunting. And so I always make sure too that I'm labeling, like my broadheads, that I have that 100 grain on there, because I used to shoot 85s, and I actually don't even have it in my bow box anymore. And then I have all my broadheads lined up here in this covered case, because again, these are all razor blades, and you don't want to just pick them up or have them in a plastic bag, because that's not very safe. So I like to shoot mechanical broadheads just because they shoot exactly like my field points. I used to shoot fixed blades, and they just wouldn't fly very well. I really struggled with those fixed blades, so I went to these, and I've been highly successful with these. There's sometimes a lot of stigma between fixed blades and the mechanicals. The technology has definitely improved with the mechanicals, and so I feel very, very confident in these in which I shoot. But that's a shooter's preference as well. So sometimes that's some of the things you just have to try when you're out there shooting and you're going to get into bow hunting, is figuring out, just like if you're rifle hunting, you need to figure out that cartridge that you prefer and that your equipment prefers. And I've found that just these mechanicals work really well. They have a really great expandable blade and a great cutting edge when it hits that target. What's really cool about most of your broadheads as well is there'll be a practice point, and I don't think I have any of those, but I don't have any. Oh yeah, here, I have one. So here's the practice point for my mechanical broadhead. It's weighted exactly the same, but I can shoot this into a target and I'm not ruining my actual broadheads because they're expensive. So I like to use these. Again, I'll use another three pattern group just to see and make sure that these are flying true to my field points. And if not, then I need to make some little minor adjustments. And maybe those adjustments are me. Sometimes I'll get into a funk and I'll change my anchor point for some reason because I'm overanalyzing where my arrows are going. And it's just like I need to go back and just get out of my own head and focus on my anchor point, focus on my muscle memory. And that's one thing with bow hunting, is there's a lot of muscle memory. You can't just go out there and shoot my bow in March and then expect to be successful come September. I've got an archery hunt September 1st, so I've definitely been trying to get my A game on for that, especially if I have that opportunity. I definitely want to maximize it to the best of my ability. So I know I've thrown a ton of information out at you, and I might have gotten a little bit too technical, but if anybody does have any questions in regards to that, or if I need to back up or focus on something else that I might have blown past, then please let me know. The other thing too that you need to match with your archery equipment is your fletching. And again, I apologize that I don't even have the most basic thing you need is a projectile for my bow. But your fletching, there's lots of different ways that you can have an archery shop fletch your arrows. And essentially what that is putting 3 plastic feathers on the back end of your arrow, and that's helping that arrow in its flight trajectory to your target. And there's lots of different ways and types of fletchings that you could put on there, but essentially what you need is 3 pieces of plastic feathers on the back end of your arrow, and that helps stabilize that arrow to spin, just like the rifling in a barrel, to be accurate and getting it down to your target. So, does anybody have any questions on that? Everybody's minds are melted, I think.
Well, we can start wrap up. If anybody has questions, feel free to either raise your hands or unmute or type them in the chat, and we can address those. In August, we'll be meeting on the 17th of August at 5:30, and somebody remind me what the topic is because I am at a total blank.
Field dressing and processing.
That's it. I knew it was something really relevant. I couldn't remember, but field dressing and processing. So we'll send out an invite like we have in the past, and you guys will definitely we would love to have everyone, and tell your friends to join us as well. But I'm not seeing questions pop up, so Jennifer has one.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're all reading. Well, that'd be cool to have your hunt filmed on a YouTube channel. You can email Jennifer there, Jen at blackmaremedia.com. So Let me copy that and I will add it to the notes when I send them out.
Yeah, that would be super cool.
Yeah.
I've always tried to do that myself in the past, and then I get just so wrapped up, and I don't want to ruin my hunt, so I'm like, oh well.
Yes.
I'll get like, oh, here's the animal, and then, oh, I forgot everything else because you're just so focused on making it happen because you worked so hard. You don't want to miss that opportunity. So it's nice if somebody else is actually trying to do that. That's pretty cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you, Laura, for that. Yeah. Always learning more about archery. So that's great. But thank you all again for joining us, and we will see you in August on the 17th. Have a
Sounds
great
great. Thanks everybody for your support. We'll see you next time.